Here's what's coming up on your horizon. Well, it's often said that you can't go wrong buying a piece of land because they just aren't making any more of it. The same can also be said for our water resources. Every drop on this planet has been here since the beginning of time, and as populations grow and scarcity replaces abundance, we are faced not only as a nation, but as a species with how we approach this valuable resource. Stay with us for Oklahoma Horizon.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education.
Oklahoma's investment in career tech provides more than nationally recognized technology education and training. It produces solid financial returns for the state's economic future. Oklahoma Career Tech, elevating our economy.
And the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. And now, from the Career Tech Studios in Stillwater, here's your host, Rob McClendon.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Horizon. Well, we often hear about a looming worldwide water crisis. Just within the next 10 years, industrialization and population growth is expected to double the world's water consumption. But what if that very demand could be the solution to the problem? Today, we're going to be looking at the economics of water, and we begin with water reuse. Joining me now is our Andy Barth.
Well, Rob, water is like gold here in Oklahoma, and how that water is used is important and always up for debate. Now, here's a quick rundown of the top 3 water uses here in the state. Now, irrigation is the largest at 40%, public water use comes in at around 30%, and livestock and aquaculture, well, that's about 12% of our overall water use. And with the drought lingering, water conservation is a top concern, causing some communities to look to new water use solutions.
Water, the lifeblood of our planet, and for Oklahoma farmers, critical for production.
The biggest uses of water right now in the state of Oklahoma are irrigation, of course. We use about 40% of our water for irrigation. A lot of that water comes actually from groundwater supplies.
Gary Fox is the interim director for the Oklahoma Water Resources Center at OSU and says the best way to identify the various water uses is by looking to the rainbow.
You know, an easy way to kind of think about water and to explain water sometimes is to think about water as being different colors. So there's our blue water, which is our water in our rivers and our streams and our lakes and our groundwater. And that's the water that we use a lot of times for drinking water supply or maybe even for irrigation. There's also green water. Green water is water that would in general be water that's stored in the crop profile that would eventually be used for plants and that can be used to grow crops and food.
And then there's gray water, the water that's collected after things like showering, washing hands, and doing laundry. And for the city of Lawton, they hope to reuse that water for other purposes. Afsana Jabbar is the Assistant Director of Water and Wastewater for the city.
At this point, we use about 3.5 million gallons of it a day for industrial purposes.
Currently, the Public Service Company of Oklahoma is the only user of gray water in the city. Yet Jabbar believes if the drought persists, gray water will be crucial in the city's future water plans.
We have had low rainfall events since 2009, and especially since 2011. Our water resources are depleting. Right now we have 43.5% of capacity left.
And the city of Lawton is not alone. In 2012, Oklahoma lawmakers passed the Water for 2060 Act, a statewide effort to consume no more fresh water in 2060 than we did in 2012. And with the drought lingering, Fox says conservation efforts must improve.
We're starting to see low water levels in our rivers and our streams and our water supply reservoirs and our irrigation supply reservoirs. For example, in the Lugar-Altus Irrigation District, we're seeing that we're about 9% of capacity. And again, that just puts more focus and more of a need for people to understand that maybe what they do, even in their daily water use, affects the entire hydrologic cycle because things are all connected. And so we need to make sure that we use the water as efficiently as we can use it.
And so the city of Lawton is working to reuse its gray water for more than industrial purposes. Yet Jabbar says the city and the state have a long way to go.
The state of Oklahoma doesn't have any regulation for this type of reuse. So of course we have to start some kind of negotiation with them. Most likely we will be one of the first few who will implement this plan because of where we are located at.
And Jabbar says the city is conducting studies and creating a plan to reuse gray water for residential use, even for drinking. And while the plan is still in its infant stages, Jabbar says the people of Lawton are their first priority.
The safety of people will be the most important thing. We will have redundancy, and we will even overtreat to make sure that safety and health of the public is taken care of.
A first step on the long road to water conservation.
Well, now Lawton isn't the only community scrambling for more water. Across the border in Wichita Falls, Texas, they're already reusing their water. The difference? They're treating their black water, which is flushed down the toilet. And Rob, it is important to know that Lawton is only wanting to use their gray water, which again is water from showering, washing your hands, and using the washing machine.
Now, if you will, go back to the Water for 2060 Act. Aside from the conservation measures, what other things can Oklahomans expect?
Well, Rob, a huge factor in accomplishing the 2460 Act is replacement and repair of our infrastructure in terms of water. A lot of our water infrastructure in the state hasn't been repaired since the 1930s, and in order to accomplish our 2460 goal, we're going to need to have these systems repaired and replaced with more up-to-date systems.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy. Important story.
You're welcome, Rob.
Now, when we return, my conversation with economist and author David Zetlin on the end of abundance.
You're watching Oklahoma Horizon, featuring some of the good things that are happening in the great state of Oklahoma.
Well, water is certainly the most precious commodity that there is, and yet most of us don't think of it as such. Its availability in seemingly unlimited quantities has made water actually lose its value. But by almost all accounts, the age of water abundance is coming to an end. I sat down with economist David Zetlin, the author of The End of Abundance, to learn why he believes many of the crises we may soon face could be solved with some simple economics. Well, David, with the world's population sitting at 7 billion, on its way to 9.5 billion by 2050, many say the conventional wisdom is that we are looking down the barrel of a global water crisis. But I've read that you may not feel that way.
Yeah, we're looking down that barrel if we don't change what we're doing. We're talking about the food and water together. Something that people leave off all the time, which is really important, is that a lot of agriculture around the world is actually rain-fed, is not irrigated. So most of the water crisis problems tend to be around irrigated water, which is super important because we get a lot more yield when we irrigate the land. So there's food policies around the world, there's food trade around the world. It's affected in many ways by these politics. And the water that goes into the food system, the growing system, is sometimes wasted. Some of the food is wasted. Sometimes we grow the wrong crops. So if we continue to do what we're doing in terms of those old habits, if we continue to keep policies the way they are in terms of grow this, don't sell it to that person, then we're going to have a bigger problem. And we is actually not Americans, we is the poorer people in the world, because money is still going to talk and people are still going to be able to afford food. But people who are malnourished today will be even worse off in the future if we don't change the way we manage those things.
Now, as an economist, you say if we apply simple economics, that dismal science to water, that in fact the solutions may not be as draconian as some predict.
Right. Yeah, that's because when I say apply economics, what I mean is allowing people to work with each other in a win-win basis. So a market is usually a win-win. You go into the store, you give them some money, they give you some food, both sides are happy. Politics tends to be a zero-sum game. Somebody wins and somebody loses. You go into a store, you take all their money, and then you run out. You know, it's a theft in a sense. So in the water sector, whether it's urban water or it's agricultural water or it's water that's used for other purposes like energy, there is a huge political and regulatory involvement. And sometimes that involvement and the policies there, they lag where people are going. They don't reflect water scarcity. And what you end up getting is people come up to a cliff and then suddenly they realize there's a shortage and they fall off the cliff. And in other sectors that are run in a more market-friendly way, then prices allow people to adjust what they're doing. So the oil and gas sector, the price of gasoline will go up, people will drive less. The price of oil goes up, people will drill more wells. So, or the gas station is running low on gas, they bring in another tanker of gas. So in those sectors, we're not used to shortages, we're not used to these problems that we see in the water sector, and we can use economics in some areas of water. We can't necessarily, it's not a free market kind of anywhere, because water tends to be distributed by a monopoly, whether it's your city water utility or it's an irrigation district. But we can allow price signals and people making deals to replace a lot of the command and control mechanism that's in place right now.
Well, roughly 70% of human-directed use of water goes towards agriculture. Now, in Israel, they use virtually all of their wastewater for irrigation on their crops. Here in the U.S., we use very little. Should we follow the Israeli model, or could we even follow the Israeli model?
So the funny thing is that a lot of farmers end up using wastewater from other farmers, because the water flows from one farmer down the river or down the canal to another farmer, or it goes underground and the farmer pumps it up again, a different farmer pumps it up. A lot of times a city will discharge its wastewater into a river, and another city will take it in and use it for drinking water. So we have been recycling water informally on a large scale in the U.S. and around the world for a long time. Israel's system of directing wastewater into irrigation is based on having a fairly compact area and directing literally a pipe of wastewater to a particular settling area that goes in, and then they pump it out again. So it's an engineered kind of system, and the natural system, and it represents the natural system that we use in the U.S. In some parts of the U.S., this also happens. There is wastewater that comes straight out of a treatment plant and onto the field. That practice of directing treated wastewater onto irrigation or even back into our drinking water systems is going to increase, because water is increasingly scarce and because the regulations and the technology for cleaning water are increasingly strict. So what you have is kind of a increasing quality of water and an increasing need for water, and those are going to meet to the point where people say, I don't call that wastewater, that's previously owned water. I'm going to buy that from you and use it for economic value, and it's going to be clean enough to use for all standards.
So it sounds as if we possibly should change our approach towards water, but also that technology may turn out to be our best friend when it comes to water.
Right. The policy should allow the technology to fill it in, right? So you can have a technology and the laws or the regulations prevent you from doing that. On the other hand, you can't make a regulation and assume the technology will show up, but those things can work hand in hand. And one of these examples is gray water use, which means taking the water out of your kitchen sink or out of your shower even, and putting that outside to water your flowers or your lawn. People have been using gray water for thousands of years. And yet, we got out of that habit when we had this awesome water coming out of our faucets that was actually very, very clean, and we put that on the lawn instead. And now the regulations say you can't put water from your shower onto your lawn because it's a human health hazard. Well, this is a bit strong, I think. And so in that case, you have a regulation which is stopping a traditional practice from occurring. And those kinds of regulations are in the way.
Now, I've read that you can boil down your water policy into basically a bumper sticker-sized slogan. And what is it? Some water for free, pay for more?
If you want to recognize some water for free, that's okay, but not all water for free. So, most people, for their personal use, they're only going to use 5 or 10 gallons a day. If they take a long shower, they might use 20 gallons a day. Let's call that free. But then you have to pay for the rest of the water, whether it's going to be water that you put in your clothes washing machine or on your driveway or on your lawn, and then you should pay for it, because in the end, every water system has to recover its costs. And if you give away water for free too much, then you have a water system that's broke, and they won't spend money to give you healthy water, and then you'll be regretting it.
Up next, learning to save water for a less rainy day.
Well, here is a rather unappetizing thought. Every drink of water you've ever taken has been used before, recycled and filtered, either by man or by nature. So when an Oklahoma student FFA program began a lesson on water conservation, they did not look down below, but up above. Joining me now is our Lisa Hines.
Rob, the recent drought has many areas trying to figure out how to stretch their water supplies. And that's why one group of students at Latta High School are becoming used water dealers.
When you think of harvesting,
you usually think of crops. But Seth Reeves, advisor to LATA FFA, says they're harvesting something different: water.
In the last few years in Pontotoc County, we've had several restrictions on watering grasses and yards and things, and so I just wanted to start looking at ways that we could here at the Ag Building teach people and show people an actual model on how to reclaim and harvest some of these natural resources to use in the future with the drought.
Using gutters and barrels.
Most buildings already have gutters on them, so why not divert those gutters into the tanks so that they can start collecting this natural resource.
Gene Reeves is with Elite Tank of Ada and says they wanted to get involved because of a new Oklahoma law.
And because of that, I went to my president of our company, Mr. J.B. Bolin, and asked him if we would partner with Seth on this rain harvesting project to help him so we could show our community and our agriculture people just exactly how we can save water for their animals or just for their home.
Now Seth says you can even drink the water collected.
My Ag 1 class, Agri-Science 1, we're going to be doing water quality studies in January on this so that we actually take slides from the diverter system that we had out front and the actual tanks we had out back. And we're also going to test the different colors of tanks to see if any light passes through and is able to cause bacteria to grow in any of the tanks. We're going to do several different things, so whenever we continue to move forward, our goal is to, as a chapter, to start marketing this through our natural resources class next year and start pushing this and promoting this as a way of, hey, this is another form of collecting drinking water for not only your animals and your plants, but also for human consumption.
Student Will Ellison is even taking this project and using it in a pitch competition for another student organization, DECA.
This project is so needed because our resources are running out, and therefore we're going to have to rely on something totally different than that.
And the FFA students are putting the water to good use.
We're using it in our greenhouse. I have 2 students right now that are doing agri-science projects. And they're testing different waters, well waters, sulfur well water, tap water from our city of Ada, and then our rainwater that we've captured in our barrels. And so we're hypothesizing that the rainwater will grow the plants better with less need for the extra added fertilizers and nutrients.
And it's a simple system.
The system we set up in the front, I wanted to set that up to show consumers that that's what it needs to look like on your house. The diverter system, the leaf eater, all of that is so important in the process, and so how it diverts the material, diverts all the refuse from any animals that may have been on top of your house, and so as that goes down and it starts to filter that water, then you only get clean fresh water into your tank.
Over the next several years, Seth says they hope to show a decrease in water usage at the school and pass on how to do that to the wider community.
And take a little pressure off our water system here in Ada, then hopefully that'll expand and move out. And so we'll just see where it goes from there.
Harvesting water to save water, one barrel at a time. Seth says he plans on using their rainwater harvesting to water LATA High School's baseball and softball fields. They're also putting in an aquaponics system using the rainwater they collect to help grow herbs for their school's lunchroom, as well as hosting a presentation for the community to learn how to harvest their own rainwater.
Well, Elisa, certainly sounds like LATA FFA is really thinking about that area's future.
They are, Rob, and none of this would be possible without a $2,000 Living to Serve grant they received from the National FFA and the transportation company CSX.
All right. Thank you so much, Elisa.
You're welcome, Rob.
Want to share something you've seen here today? Well, all of our episodes are streaming on our YouTube channel at Oklahoma Horizon TV. Or you can subscribe to our weekly free podcasts on iTunes.
Well, David Zetlin believes sustainable water management is best served by no-nonsense economic analysis. As we continue our conversation, I ask him about some of the key points in his book, The End of Abundance. Now, you've written about the water-energy nexus, and here in the heart of energy country, we use a lot of water to get a lot of energy. Is that a dilemma?
No, not to me. So I don't like the whole idea of a water-energy nexus. I call it the coffee-donut nexus. You know, why don't we have a coffee-donut nexus? Why isn't there some guy in charge of coffee and donuts? And the reason that we don't have a guy in charge of that is because there's a whole industry called donuts, and there's a whole industry called coffee, and they have price signals. And when you're running out of coffee, someone's going to show up with the coffee or they're going to raise the price. If you're running out of donuts, it's the same kind of response. So the water energy nexus is the idea that because we use water to make energy and we use energy to pump water, we need to manage them together. And I say that's not the way to do it. What we need to have is a water sector that is run on a financially sustainable basis, where the price of water reflects the scarcity of water, and an energy sector which has for many, many, many years run on a scarcity basis. When energy is scarce, it's expensive. Now in the US, the fracking revolution literally has dropped the price of natural gas by 3/4. So what you have is a price of energy that goes up and down based on supply and demand, and you could have a price of water that goes up and down based on supply and demand. So what I say is leave energy alone, and the energy sector can buy water as long as it's paying a correct price, a fair price if you want, that reflects the scarcity of the water. So instead of going towards more and more management of water and extending its hand into energy, I think that the water sector should be setting more appropriate prices. So urban water is a whole different story, your tap water. So the scarcity should be higher when your city is in a shortage. But when you're talking about agricultural water and bulk water that these fracking guys are buying, they don't pay $10 for a permit and take unlimited water out of the river. They should be paying something close to a market price that reflects that scarcity. And it might be a price that a bunch of farmers agree that they want to sell it to the energy company. That's fine, as long as everybody realizes that they're paying a fair price to take that quantity of water, and then they'll go use it for energy. And if the price rises high enough, as you know, the energy companies will find ways to use less water. They'll recycle their water and use it again. They'll get water from a lower quality, more salty water. And they will only do that when the price signal is there. If they're given water for free, they'll use it.
And water does not respect state boundaries.
So there's two ways to look at it. Number one is that it has to cross the state boundaries. And some people try and stop it, and they just use it there. But this happens with the U.S. and Mexico on the Colorado River. But the other one is that people say, I don't want someone on the other side of the boundary to buy or use this water from someone on this side of the boundary. And that makes sense only when some group of people in the state don't want the other group of people in the state to benefit from selling the water. So if I have water to sell and you want to buy it, but someone over there wants to pay more, then I should be able to sell it to the guy who wants to pay more. And you make a law saying I can't, well, now I'm a little bit upset. Right? But that's what happens with these state controversies.
What in the instances when it's in-ground water and it's flowing down and you take water, pipe it out, and sell it to whomever, and then the person down the aquifer doesn't have the water to use?
That is a big problem. And there's lots of examples of upstream people taking water and hurting the downstream people. There's people that take water out of the aquifer and hurt the other members of the aquifer. Those examples tend to illustrate a need to either respect the property rights or to reform the property rights. So on a river, you have riparian rights, which say you can use water if you do not impair your neighbors. So taking the water out of the river is actually illegal. In an aquifer, if you are sharing it and you have a right to take the water out of the aquifer, if someone's taking your water, then you have a right to get them to stop it. That's awfully hard to prove sometimes, but there's different ways to do it, and it stands on property rights.
Here's one that I think is interesting. Take nothing, we die. When it comes to water, take everything, and we die as well.
Right. This is referring to the water and the environment. So we must take water out of the environment. We must deplete a river to an extent to grow food or even to take a shower. So in that sense, we have to take it out or we die. But if we take it all out, if we deplete our environment and and literally it's just we're surrounded by concrete, then we'll also die because we receive not just the beauty of nature, but all kinds of what they call ecosystem services. We get clean air. We get the ecosystem cleans water. It protects us from floods. It buffers the winter rains so they come out in the summer. So in that sense, the environment is our partner in managing water, and we want to put as much emphasis on that as we can. There was not a lot of emphasis in the last 50 years, the age of concrete in a sense. So what we ended up doing is we ended up building, for example, reservoirs above ground with concrete that would store water, but we would lose a lot to evaporation. And we did not use an underground aquifer that can store water without evaporation. And so in some ways, using nature for water management is a cost-effective way of getting bigger benefits from water.
Fascinating conversation. David Zetlin, an economist and author of The End of Abundance, Economic Solutions to Water Scarcity. Next time on Oklahoma Horizon, turning trash into energy.
What Covanta does is we take the household garbage that remains after the recycling process and combust it in specially designed boilers to produce high temperature, high pressure steam.
Innovation, investments, and new energy on Oklahoma Show for the Heartland, Oklahoma Horizon. Well, thanks for including us as part of your day. I'm Rob McClendon. See you back here next week.
Thank you for watching Oklahoma Horizon.